Yo, yo, yiggity, yo. It's us. We're back. Welcome to the Zillennial support group, the podcast with your hosts, Silvana and Marriya. And we're the show where we talk about our childhood trauma, our happy memories from childhood, but mostly cultural moments from the late 90s, early 2000s to reminisce, to heal some generational trauma, but also bridge the gap between generations about the good times and maybe some of the bad times. I'm rambling here, but today the topic of this episode is not so much an event, but a place. And it's not really about a specific generation. I feel like multiple generations have visited this place, but for us, everyone we know around the age of 9 went to Colonial Williamsburg during the early 2000s. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about our experiences on the hallowed, haunted grounds of Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia. Not the cool Williamsburg in New York, Brooklyn, but
I feel like we were always faked out about that. Like, people would share things that was like, a Harry Potter bar is coming to Williamsburg. And for like a good day, we would be really excited.
But also, Colonial Williamsburg would be the perfect place for a Harry Potter bar. Like,
right?
Knowing the audience, like, the total missed opportunity. But all the bars in Colonial Williamsburg are owned by the same mafia, so.
Mm-hmm. But there was like I think the original Magical Congress of America in Harry Potter was originally based in Colonial Williamsburg.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Fun fact. I was in Harry Potter club.
So,
did every
that is something you definitely want to brag about, though,
right?
Being in Harry Potter club. But what were you saying?
Well, I was wondering, like, did every state have like a trip to Colonial Williamsburg? Because I feel like I've seen YouTubers who are like talking about Colonial Williamsburg. Like, it's Sophia Nygaard is really obsessed with Colonial Williamsburg, and so like I can't tell.
Yeah, I think it's low-key like a pretty popular attraction. It's so close to bankruptcy and it makes no money, but I feel like everybody's been forced to go there when they were a kid anyways. Yeah, I hear people talk about it from all up the East Coast at least.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a popular thing for people like in the Midwest or something like that, but
yeah, because I think we kind of got the short stick, because I think the two big like vacation destinations or school trip destinations is Colonial Williamsburg and DC. And that's like was like right in our backyard. And so every single time it was like, okay, let's just get on the metro and
yeah. So sometimes I'm like, well, is it a Virginia thing that this is a popular destination, or is it like we're just really important to the rest of the country too? Because like Virginia history is kind of America's history. So I feel like at least in the OG 13 colonies, Colonial Williamsburg is like a big deal for fourth grade history students.
Yeah.
But so the first time I went there, I think I was with my school, and we sort of like did like an all-in-one. Like we visited Jamestown for a hot sec, and then we went to Colonial Williamsburg. And then we all like went to the gift shop and bought some like chocolates, and I bought like one of those tin flutes.
Ooh.
And then I don't know if you bought that funky bonnet you got on, that funky hat.
I have no idea. I think it was my sister's.
It was your sister's? Did you get it in Colonial Williamsburg, or
no idea?
You just like wanted one in your everyday life, so you were like, I must.
I think we just have it. I think it came with the house. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm glad it took us a solid 5 minutes into the podcast to mention that Marriya is wearing a bonnet. We're recording this episode on the same day as our previous one, so Marriya did, the due diligence of changing her appearance up a little bit. I think I shifted maybe like 2 inches to the left of the screen, and that's my little variation, but
I'm
she looks
carrying the
great. It
weight.
goes really well with your outfit, Marriya. Oh my
Thank you
God.
very much. Yeah, and I actually think the lighting is better under the
Yeah,
under the
I'm glad.
bonnet.
Yeah. um,
It's kind of tight around the neck, so I might pass out at some point.
that's
If
okay.
you
If you
just
have to
watched
take
the
one for the
last
team,
if you
I
just watched the
totally give you
last
the go.
episode about us passing out constantly.
It's worth it, No pain, no gain.
Hmm.
And life is about pain.
It is.
No upsides. Anyways, so I think the second time I went to Colonial Williamsburg, I was with my family. And we also kind of were there for Busch Gardens too, which is another amusement park, a draw for the area. But we happened to visit like a few days before the Queen of England visited Williamsburg. And it was a huge deal. Like, I don't think she visits very often. And it
Visited
was,
twice.
yeah, I think it was like maybe for her birthday or something, like a big anniversary.
Oh, it was
Um,
the 200. I don't remember how many years of Jamestown. It was the anniversary of Jamestown.
oh, 400?
Maybe. I don't know. I
Oh,
said
yeah.
200. That seems like really low.
America America was founded in the 1800s. But I think it was 1607 was Jamestown. So maybe 2007, the 400
Hmm.
year anniversary, she was there. So that was probably the year I visited. Um,
It was May. I just
yeah.
remember it's May.
Honestly, you know what? I remember driving down to Colonial Williamsburg, and it was like a long car ride. And you know what album I listened to on the car ride down to Colonial Williamsburg?
Jamestown.
Jamestown. But I listened to Riot by Paramore on a loop on my CD player, like in my head. Yeah, I was that kid. I was so punk. It was so good.
Oh, I thought you
But
were bringing it up because like of the rebellion, of the
the rebellion.
Revolutionary War.
Yeah, no, the album's called Riot, and that's what the colonists did back in
And they played
um
it on the flute.
1778. Yeah. 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 I bought that tin flute in order to start, a pop punk band all about rebellion. And that was going to be my instrument, my contribution to the band. But yeah, our vacation was only until like Tuesday. And so we never got to see the Queen. But we weren't huge fans, We're not her groupies.
You're
So we
not
were like, oh,
team
that's cool.
colonizer.
Yeah, but but yeah, so we didn't stay, but I do remember feeling like, oh, that's so cool, like the Queen's going to be where I stood like 2 days ago. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of my childhood memories with Colonial Williamsburg. I thought it was cool. I didn't really uh I wasn't super interested in the history, but I thought like colonial life was cool. We did take a ghost tour when I was there. And I remember my parents were like, oh, we're like going to go out, like wear a nice dress. And so I did. And then it was freezing. And I was so pissed because my legs were super cold.
Was
And it
it
was
freezing?
springtime.
Was it freezing because of the weather or because of the
Yeah.
supernatural energy?
You know what? We'll never know. And I remember sitting on the steps it was either the Wren building or like the president's house where we were sitting on the steps as they were telling the final story. And I was like, damn, it's either cold because it's like late March, early April, or it's cold because of all the dead bodies floating around me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember taking a ghost tour. I thought it was really cool. I wish it was more exciting, but basically like people in the colonies back in the day, they just died really easily. They weren't built for the environment. Stairs weren't a popular thing back then, so sometimes people would fall and not know what to do. And so a lot of people died by falling down
There wasn't
stairs.
life alert.
Yeah, there was no life alert. They wore a lot of big dresses that if they caught fire, you couldn't really escape. You couldn't just take off your skirt. So a lot of people died that way. Um,
It's also haunted by pirates.
and by pirates. Yeah, they did whitewash the history a little bit. They didn't talk about the brutal genocides that went on in the colonies of the poor natives fighting for their safety. But good times. Good times. But I understand in your later years, you grew to know much about the ghosts of Colonial Williamsburg.
Yeah, yeah.
So did you know as a child visiting Williamsburg that you were going to one day, you know, own those lands,
I
own
own Colonial Williamsburg.
you know, be in charge of, leading people around and telling them stories? Or uh, did you go there and you were like, kind of never want to come back? I guess I'll spend a lot of time here.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't really think much about it. I mean, so I think the first time I went was like my sister's school trip, and then I came to, and I just apparently terrorized all of the squirrels. But I think that's the thing where it's like every single college thinks that their squirrels are like special and they're like not
That's
afraid
so
of
true.
humans. But those were afraid of humans, and I chased them, and I was horrible. Um, and then I think the second time, I was late because we like had a dance show, and so I like missed the whole Jamestown element, but then we had to like go, I think, later. And I remember I got to carve wood and stuff, and I still
Oh
have my little wood
yeah.
spiral. Um, and then, but like because we were trying to fit in like what the whole group had done the day before, we were really pressed for time. And so
Oh
I went to like a really preppy school, preppy private school that like they would lecture us about um like manners. And so um like I don't even remember what it was. It was like you just like can't eat quickly or something, or like that was like a rule that like we had to like sign a pledge that like we wouldn't eat quickly, and like we wouldn't like
wow.
we
They
would finish.
monitored the way children ate. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Like you would always have your napkin on your lap, and
Oh wow.
um like you wouldn't like you would have to put down all of your silverware before you like grabbed your drink and stuff. um
Wow.
and like my dad was rushing to eat so that we could go off to the next thing, and he was like eating really fast, and I started yelling at him that we were going to get in trouble. um
Oh my god.
but yeah, and then I remember we saw the like parade that goes
Mm.
down Dog Street and Duke of Gloucester Street for the
Ooh.
non-natives, um, the non-locals.
None of us are natives.
Um, and I remember like saying, because we had to like write a journal or something about it, and I was like, it's the only time. It's like the annual parade, and it only happens once a year. But now that I like have lived in Colonial Williamsburg, I know it just happens like every day. Like
Yeah, a
it
lot of
wasn't a big
reenactments go
thing.
on.
But as a kid, I was mainly mad that the hotel didn't have Disney Channel.
Aw.
I was really pissed
Wow.
off about that.
Yeah, you should be.
Yeah, but yeah, I think like I don't know. I didn't really think much about like William and Mary.
Hmm.
Later on, I don't think I ever went to like the campus as a
Yeah.
kid. So
I
yeah.
think the one time I went on campus was just like the tip, and it was part of the ghost tour too.
Hmm.
And so I thought it was cool. And I like the fact that it had walls on the campus. There was like a delineation between the town and the campus. I don't know. I remember liking it a lot more when I went with my parents just because like we could do whatever. Whereas the school trips, I feel like you never really enjoy your time there fully wherever you go because they're like very I mean the chaperones are always stressed out about keeping track of like a million kids on like a schedule and everybody gets up at like 5 a.m. to get on a bus to go
Yeah.
there. Um and because most of the time it is like just a day trip, like you have to pack in everything and then you just like leave. But I don't know. I remember I bought a chocolate bar and it was okay during my school trip.
Well,
Um
like all the free samples of chocolate, don't ever take them. Like in Colonial Williamsburg, it's
mhm.
disgusting because it's like
Yeah.
the like very much well, I think the one in the free gift shop, like not that any gift shop is free, but like the
Mm.
one where you don't need a pass to get in,
Oh yeah.
they do have like hot chocolate or something in there, and that shit is nasty. Because it has like I
Yeah.
don't even know what it was, but it was just really, really horrible. But at the coffee house has good hot chocolate. because that
Oh,
one is
yeah.
basically like just chocolate syrup.
Yeah. I think I actually visited Williamsburg quite a few times in my life without really wanting to. like like it was a trip where it was arranged by someone else that I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm going there again." Cuz I
Oh, I
remember
was
I
imagining that you
visited.
just like had a musket to your head and you were like, "Go walk."
That's exactly how it went down. But I remember I went there as a high school kid as well with my school. Um and I remember like going into the bookstore and like seeing it and just knowing I would later work there was like, damn, if only I knew. But as a kid, I remember seeing like the colonial games and like I think there was candle making at one station and stuff like that. And I always thought that was cool because they had all this free time. And in my head, I'm like, it must have been so fun to like not have to do shit in the colonial times. Um, and I remember my parents saying like, oh well, they had to fill their time up because they were bored all the time. Like they didn't really have anything to do. And so it sucked like that they were so bored all the time. And in my head I'm like, I'm so stressed out all the time. All I want is to do nothing. As like this 9-year-old kid, just like with homework and stuff, I was like, I don't want to do stuff.
You were
I
like,
just
"I was
like,
born in the
yeah.
wrong era."
I just want to like
Like
have
a
a
ball and
ball
rope.
attached to a stick and then you just have to like make the ball go into the top part. Do you remember that game?
Yeah.
Simple times, you know. But of course I wouldn't exist back then. And I really liked the movie Pocahontas when I was a kid.
Mm.
Um and it was kind of sad to like get older and to uh figure out that the movie was a lie and it was very very different from reality of what
Yeah.
happened. Um and also I don't know, I also remember watching that movie and I'm like, he got shot. Why is he not dead? They just like put him on a boat and
Wish
send him
he
to
had died. I
America.
fucking
And I'm
hate
like
John Smith. I
and
hate him.
I feel like in real life if he had got shot like he would have died. He would have bled out or gotten infected. He wouldn't have survived month-long boat ride, ship ride all the way back to England.
Yeah.
Like that's so
Well, that's like
dumb.
I don't know. That's the thing is that John Smith, every single time he went on an expedition, like years later after everyone had died who was like a part of it, he would write this big account that like some native had fallen in love with him and that he
Oh
was
my
like this big
god.
hero when he was like maybe like 40 or something or 30 or 40 and she was like
Yeah.
7 and
Yeah.
it's just ridiculous and he was even such an asshole that on the boat over, um, he got like into fights that
Oh
he
my
was
god.
put in boat prison on the way
White men are
over.
so problematic. They're always
And
fighting. Ugh.
but then so they had this thing where they wouldn't tell anybody who was like the captain of the expedition or anything until they
Mm.
got to Jamestown because they didn't want like some rivalry or something happening on the
Wow.
boat. And so when they got to the Jamestown, they realized that John Smith was one of the named captains. And they're like, shit, now we have to let him out of boat jail.
Boat jail. It really was like the Wild West of just like going to America and we're like, I guess we have to govern ourselves and like if shit goes down,
Well,
we
that's
gotta
also
put
the
them in
thing
boat
is
jail.
I think one of the main problems, I mean, there were a lot of problems and like colonization is also bad, but the big thing is that all of these people that were coming were gentlemen, like lords and stuff, and they didn't
Yeah, they
have any
weren't they
skills.
couldn't work the land. Yeah, they're
They
really
had no
helpless.
skills.
Which is why like the first colony Roanoke uh they a lot of them died or they like assimilated into like the native tribes.
Mhm.
Um because they were just so dumb.
Yeah.
Like what did they think was going to happen? Did they yeah, I don't know.
But
But
fun fact only basically for you, Silvana, because no one this won't matter to anyone else. Um, so as part of Pocahontas's tribe, I don't know, it might be common with all tribes anyway, but they take like a children's name and an adult name.
oh,
And so Pocahontas was only her childhood name. And then took another name in
Okay.
adulthood, and that was Matoka. So if you know
Yeah,
Lake
Matoka.
Matoka in
That was her
Colonial
name.
Williamsburg, and yeah,
Yeah, a
it's a
lot
good
of things are named that in like streets and stuff. But yeah, I think a few months ago I found this website off of someone's Instagram where you can put in your zip code and you can search what native land you're on currently. Like there are like overlaps of different tribes in different areas, but you can Google like what part of the state you're in belong to like what tribes and what land was theirs. So you can always look that up, viewers at home. It's very interesting. I found the land that New York was on, and that was cool. And then I remember being taught we were part of like um, that the Native American tribe that was near Virginia and like Jamestown and Williamsburg, it was like Iroquois. But I feel like that might be a bit vague and there might be more specific tribes to look up.
yeah.
But yeah, I do encourage everyone to look up that information just as cool knowledge to have, but also appreciation of like we're all
Yeah. I want to say that Williamsburg was or at least the native, so like William and Mary, they like kidnapped native children to like bring them and like civilize them. I'm doing
oh
quotations
yeah.
for those listening. So they like stripped them of their native names and tried to make them be like good white people.
Oof,
And that was from
yeah.
the Pamunkey tribe.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And there are certain names on campus too that like are named after either certain people or the certain tribes. But I also remember reading up about the real Pocahontas, Matoka,
Hmm.
and what she later went on to do because she was sort of like married off to this Englishman who wasn't John Smith. And she had a
John
kid in
Rolfe, I think.
England, and they tried to like assimilate her into British society, which I don't know how that went down in like actual life,
Oh, it
if
went bad.
she was accepted or not. But basically, she died of asthma because the industrial air was so like the pollution was so bad over there because white people ruined the earth. Um, but she died of asthma, and growing up with a kid, like as a kid with asthma, I was like, I'm gonna die. Like if I ever visit England, I'm gonna die because the air is so bad over there.
Have you been
But
to England?
I have not.
Good.
I'm
No, but
staying
like,
put for my safety.
but that was like a
But
big thing of, they like named her Rebecca, and then they
oh
brought her to England as like a way to show that like it was possible to colonize these
yeah,
savages. And so
as
then they
like
paraded her
some
off.
terrible alternative to the genocide that was
Yeah.
going on, basically.
And then I think they just like John Rolfe just like dropped off her kid, their kid, and
Yeah.
like never raised him ever.
Yeah, it was interesting. I did have a camp counselor from North Carolina who she said that her son and his lineage, like in England, they eventually came back to America,
Mm.
and she's descendant from that family of like
Yeah.
her son. I don't know if that's true, but I do believe her, and that is pretty cool. That like even though they like took her and brought her to England, that her family like made it back to America. But yeah, it is really sad and tragic. But
Yeah. But I feel like the information that we get as like children just doesn't really, like, I mean, I think when
doesn't
we,
age well.
yeah, no, cuz I think like we all dressed up as like Indians for like Thanksgiving and stuff,
Oh
and we were
yeah.
like they just had meals together and were
Yeah, like in
happy.
that in that Adams Family movie where they like
Mhm.
put on a play of like the Pilgrims and the Indians. Um yeah, we were definitely taught as kids like at least what education was like in public schools, in like the mid 2000s. Um it was definitely like the Indians were so nice to us, and like they taught the like colonists how to farm and stuff. Like that was the narrative I was taught. Um, so like they never painted the Indians as like somehow bad to us, but they totally like whitewashed how terribly um the natives were treated by the colonists, and like there are accounts of like they talked about how a lot of them died when like the British germs came into America, and like their immune systems weren't ready for it. Um,
The guns, germs, and steel.
yeah, but there are actual accounts of like the colonists in Massachusetts and Virginia and all different places where they were like, in order to get rid of the natives, we're going to take our blankets from our hospital sick beds and give them to them to barter with so that they'll get sick. So they did it on purpose.
So
Isn't that terrible? Oh my God. Like, and they have like, you know, records and logs of them doing it on purpose. Yeah. I'm just like, the education really, the Zillennial education does not hold up over time of like, you know, what we know now and like what actually went on back then.
Yeah. It's really crazy when I think about, I don't know, like I remember when we learned about like the Revolutionary War, they just had us stick our feet into buckets of ice water to like simulate the crossing of the Delaware.
The crossing of the Delaware. Oh my God.
And we weren't allowed to get out until like we felt like we had enough, which I think was like ridiculous. But then I also think about how like we had to do I don't remember what it was called, but we had to do a play in like 4th grade or something that was about a girl dying after like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and like she was trying to make like 100 paper cranes before she died, and that was weird that it was like a bunch of like white kids and like doing that.
God. Yeah, I remember like years before I went on a school trip to Colonial Williamsburg, we definitely like had, I don't know if it was like for a particular holiday or just like a random day in school where we all like dressed up as colonial people and like did that whole thing. Like we learned how to churn butter in school. Like I remember, I think I was like in 1st grade and they were like, we're going to teach these kids how to churn butter. And then like we ate it on saltine crackers, which is probably one of the whitest experiences I've ever had. Churning butter in school and then eating it on like eating plain unsalted butter on saltine crackers. It's kind of strange how like every kid sort of like goes through that, where they like learn about colonial times and I don't know, like Jamestown and stuff. I know in New England it's very different. Like everybody sort of thinks that Plymouth Rock is like the first colony when we're like, no, we were the OGs. But yeah, I remember learning things about like the white colonists, and they're just like, look how they lived life back then. And there were just things about like, oh, kids stood when they eat, and like kids were very like they did all the chores and blah blah blah. And they definitely left out the like the cannibalism of the colonies during, you know, the first few winters and stuff, and how gruesome it was, and how, you know, they really it was very dark times. Like the people who, you know, can trace their lineage back to, you know, the Mayflower and all these colonial times, like their families in America have been here a long time, like they come from people who went through really intense shit and also like did really terrible dark things too, to like,
well, because I think we think of like, when we think of like the colonial era, we think of like Felicity from American Girls, but we don't think about how her family probably like enslaved a bunch of people.
Yeah, and I also think there's this sort of history of they're like, oh, the people who came to America were like very religious, devout people who just like wanted to come to America so that they could be religious without fear or whatever. And it's like, oh no, they came to America in order to just like kill a ton of Native people, which is not a religious thing to do, FYI.
And then they try to convert them as well.
Yeah, it was very.
Stop that.
Yeah, but it's also, it's like, I guess you can't really teach kids about genocide. It's a very sad thing to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you wait until a certain age to teach them about the Holocaust and things like that. So it's interesting to think like you have to teach your kids one thing and then like you teach them the darkness of what actually happened later on as they get older. I don't know if I would want, like, I don't know if I would want the alternative of taking like a kid to Colonial Williamsburg at 9 years old and saying, look at all these white people back then, they killed so many innocent native people, and that's what happened on these grounds.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they talk very much about native life um, in Colonial Williamsburg, but they have done a lot better at having enslaved people talk about their
Yeah.
experiences, or like one of the I think he was uh, a liberated black person,
Ooh,
Lafayette, and he talks about like his
Lafayette.
experience. Um, and so they've done a little bit more with that, but like a lot of it is primarily
Yeah.
white.
So, a little bit background on actual Colonial Williamsburg and the reenactments that happened there. The whole town is basically owned and funded by the Rockefeller estate. So, basically, like, there were some ruins sort of preserved from that time. And then part of the like philanthropy of the Rockefeller estate was them funding um, a ton of restoration of the town as a sort of like, you know, like a tourist thing to like preserve history.
Yeah.
So a
So
lot of the like, look how old this thing was from the 1800s, 1600s, 1700s, when really it was like something that was just rebuilt in the 1930s.
yeah,
And it looks old just because it's from the 1930s, but it's not old because it's from the 1700s.
basically, um, until like the 1930s, they didn't really know what a lot of it looked like, and so in um, it was around at that point that they found this thing called the, I don't know if it's the Bodleian, I don't know what it's called, but the plate at Oxford Library.
Oh,
And so basically it was an advertisement about like come to Virginia, like these are like the plants. I think they did have like pictures of like native people and stuff. And they had images of the historic courtyard, so Wren Building, President's House, Brafferton, and then they had pictures of the president's house, or not the president's house, the governor's palace,
right.
and the Capitol. And so that's how they were able to like reconstruct it,
Oh,
because it was like I think I'm thinking it's the like um, bishop or like something Goodwin met Rockefeller because Rockefeller, I believe, is in Phi Beta Kappa, which was also
oh,
founded in Colonial Williamsburg. It's like the big National Honor Society, and so
yeah.
they had a like a Phi Beta Kappa event where they were like, I think it was maybe they had set up like a new Phi Beta Kappa hall or something,
Mm.
and they were like, this is the project that we want to do. We want to restore all this, and so that's kind of how they went about that. And there is like a big like Rockefeller house in Colonial
Oh,
Williamsburg,
wow.
and but I mean a lot of it like they weren't completely super specific on the details. So like a lot of things are actually like built kind of the wrong way. So
Oh,
um,
wow.
like the Brafferton, they changed the whole shape of the stairways and stuff, and so it looks like the school for Native Americans um, opens up into the regular courtyard, when in
Mm.
reality, based on the old step, it was the other way, and so they were
Yeah.
basically blocked off from the rest of campus, and so they weren't super like particular on keeping that stuff historically accurate. But yeah, yeah, it's interesting. And um, I was telling Silvana the other day about my plan um, to fix gun control.
Oh, yeah.
Um, And so there is like a gun maker shop. And I think that everyone should have to trade in their assault rifles for a musket because you can't really
Yeah.
do that much when you have to just
Yeah.
keep going. And so it'll save Colonial Williamsburg and it will
Mhm.
stop mass shootings.
Yeah, because besides the terrible, terrible gun control problem America has, another problem that this country has is that Colonial Williamsburg is going bankrupt.
Yeah.
They're losing so much money because of the lack of tourism, which that was even before COVID, so I don't even know what's going on right now.
Hmm.
But I remember, like, I worked in the bookstore in Colonial Williamsburg, and we'd have people come into the cafe all the time who worked there, and they were like, guys, another round of layoff is happening. So, like, if I don't come in for my coffee next week, like, you know what happened.
Oh my God.
And there was a lot of restructuring going on in, like, 2017, 2018. Um, and so they were trying to look for funding or to see what could be saved because they were really bleeding money. They didn't know how long they could last. So, I mean, they're still there. But I remember during that time was also when the infamous terrible, terrible commercial came out for Colonial Williamsburg, where they were rewinding historical events of America until colonial times. And they were like, come back, like rewind and go back in history to Colonial Williamsburg. And it was um, one of the most expensive marketing campaigns for Colonial Williamsburg. They spent so much money on it, and it completely backfired because they bought this huge, very expensive spot during the Super Bowl, and they basically showed the image of the 9/11 towers going back up. Like as they fell down, they reversed the footage as
Oh my
part of their
God.
rewinding history thing in the commercial. And I mean, that's some of the most traumatic images you can show Americans during the Super Bowl, which is like one of, it's a happy event for Americans. And then you show that image, and it was one of like the biggest marketing missteps. In my marketing course, we talked about how that was one of like the worst mistakes you can make.
Oh
And
my God.
from a marketing perspective. And so it was definitely like that was one of their last ditch efforts to like promote tourism for Colonial Williamsburg. And it completely backfired. So I don't know how well their
Yeah.
tourism is doing.
Well,
And with COVID, I
they used
mean,
to have like a whole TV making, media making um like sector, and they won a bunch of Emmys or something, or like daytime Emmys. I don't know. I think it's also like I'm not, you know, saying that Colonial Williamsburg is amazing. Um, but I think there is also like a part of it of like there is like a certain sector of like woke people
mm-hmm.
and like people who still want the whitewashed version of
Yeah,
like slavery and everything. And so it's hard when you're like in a tourism market to like actually talk about the reality of history. But then also like I've heard stories of people saying like going to plantations and
wow.
being told about the enslaved people there, and they're like, I don't want to hear about that on my vacation. It's like, well, you went to a
Wow.
fucking
But
plantation.
also, I mean, yeah, if you want a historical vacation, you're going to have to embrace all the parts of history. You can't
Hmm.
just like, because then it's just a fantasy vacation. It's not a historical vacation.
Yeah. But I
But
did get into like some trouble with Colonial Williamsburg because they started selling like um sale of slave ads and
oh my
stuff.
God, I remember hearing about
and
that.
and so I like
Oof.
yelled at them and I was like, what the fuck are you selling like this for?
Yeah.
Because they like had blanks where you could like fill things in. So literally you could like buy one for someone and fill in their name, and it could be just like the worst Mad Lib ever, and it was
Oof.
just so ridiculous.
It's so
And
tone deaf too.
yeah, and so they ended up pulling those, and we had a whole conversation, and it was just basically they were like teaching materials that like accidentally went on sale or something. But
Yeah. At least it seems that it's getting better in terms
mhm,
of like representing the history. So hopefully that progress continues.
yeah, and at
But
least Colonial Williamsburg started American Girl, but I feel like that's a longer. We want to have a longer episode on American Girl, but
Yeah.
basically, it was started because um, the woman who started American Girl came to Colonial Williamsburg and was like, "I want this for the kids, but
Oh,
in
wow.
doll form that we can
But in
sell."
doll form. Wow. And that was Felicity, right?
Yeah, I mean Felicity. I don't think she was one of the originals actually,
Oh, okay.
but I think like Addie,
Yeah.
maybe Molly was original. I think Samantha might have been. Kirsten. I think those
Oh,
might have been the
yeah.
original. Maybe Josephina. I can't remember
Yeah.
when she came in.
I do remember that the Felicity movie was filmed in Colonial Williamsburg, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
So we
So was
also,
Turn Washington Spies. I
yeah.
love that show.
Yes. Um, I don't think I ever finished that show, but I did really like it. I also remember in high school is when I was like first getting into screenwriting and like TV and like looking at that as an actual career. And I remember thinking of ideas and I was like, "Ooh, I wish there was like a Mad Men style period drama, but like for colonial times." And then AMC, the same network as Mad Men, was like, "We have a colonial drama in the works." And I was like, "Oh no."
So
But
instead, we did an Office, Parks and Rec
yeah.
inspired show.
So if anybody is in the need for some colonial um television content, we do have a modern day uh
Mockumentary.
mockumentary sort of feud
Tourism feud. Yeah.
colonial tourism uh web series called, what is it called? Oh my god.
The unofficial
The
board of
unofficial
visitors.
board of visitors, because a lot of the people who make decisions in terms of the college and Colonial Williamsburg itself is the board of visitors. And so they're really the decision makers, and the people responsible for a lot of the issues the town has. And so the unofficial board of visitors was sort of trying to do changes for the better, in maybe unorthodox and uninfluential ways, but they do take themselves very seriously. They took their work very seriously, so seriously that they wrote a whole second season that never got produced.
Yeah.
But
Whoops.
we were underfunded. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's streaming now on YouTube for anyone who's interested.
It's
Uh,
been streaming for like 2 years.
yeah, developed, produced, co-written, and filmed, directed, edited by yours truly, Marriya and Silvana. um, and we're experts. We were of course the right people to make that kind of show.
Hmm.
You can see evidence here by the bonnet that Marriya is wearing. Who else would you want to produce your colonial TV show besides this girl in a bonnet? There's no one else. Competition, none.
AMC Who?
Yeah. Okay. So my microphone shut off again.
Oh no.
And I think that's just a sign that we're wrapping things up. Whatever audio I end up keeping, it's fine. This was a great episode. Yeah. We'll see what happens. But I hope you've enjoyed uh going back in time to the mid 2000s, but also back in time to the colonial times, the 1600s. And you know taking a look at a part of everyone's childhood of visiting Colonial Williamsburg on a school trip and seeing how that affected our view of history as we developed as Zillennials in America. So thank you for coming. I hope you
Bye.
enjoyed Maria's bonnet, and this is where we leave you.
Bye.
Bye.